Well, thank you. Since I can't see any of the attendees, we are going to assume all of you are smiling and excited. So we are the University of Minnesota Libraries publishing team. Thank you for coming to this session. I'm going to just give first of all, a brief overview of what publishing looks like at the University of Minnesota and how we're structured as a team, because that context is very important for the conversation we're going to have today. So who we are, as Dave introduced us, we are the University of Minnesota Libraries publishing team. We are a 4-member team that includes myself, John Barneson, Laureen Boutang, and Nackerud. Thank you for attending today. I do just want to take a minute to have a few sort of disclaimers on our presentation. One, that is, we are a 4-member team at the University of Minnesota, but our team actually expands beyond that. This year, we have been greatly helped by John Sharp, an MLIS student at the University of College Dublin, who has worked on projects with us, Nancy Sims, the copyright librarian at the University of Minnesota, and a number of subject librarians, our colleagues at the U of M, who we actually work with on projects. Their roles range from highly involved to sort of troubleshooting in and out when we need them. So our team is actually a little bit bigger than represented on the screen. I also want to say very quickly that it has been a year, and it has been a big year since the last Library Publishing Forum. That has meant a lot for us at the University of Minnesota. Not only was there COVID, we also lived through George Floyd's murder, Dante Wright's recent murder, protests, policing, frustration. We at the University of Minnesota also had to say goodbye to about 22 colleagues who took retirement through a university offered program. So it's been a year. I think that is important because, as Shane recently said at a team meeting, we have probably never been closer as a team. We meet almost every day, the 4 of us, to discuss the projects that we're working on. We share a lot of work. And so I think that's important. And I just wanted to start that off because what we're going to be talking about today, we probably could have given this presentation in any of the last few years, but this year has really been a chance that each of us has really worked together on projects across publishing. So thank you for that brief, staying with me for that brief introduction. I'm not going to read this all, but I do think it's important to note that the University of Minnesota Libraries publishing is based off of principles. We, of course, have a business plan that dictates and kind of guides us through a lot of the work that we may or may not take on, but really our principles are at the core of that. Our principles do a lot of things. They tell us where we hope to go. They help us measure if we've been reaching some of our goals and aspirations, but they also connect strongly with the publications that we're going to talk about today. And those principles that are most relevant are that at the University of Minnesota Libraries Publishing, we seek to create partnerships on campus and beyond to help shape the future of scholarly publishing. This principle in particular really provides a lot of reasoning why we've started to work with WordPress, why some of the publications that are on WordPress, why we have them in our portfolio at all. So that's really a principle that has led to some great developments at the U of M libraries. One of our other principles that is, of course, related is that we support innovative publications and scholarly experimentation grounded in widely used standards and time-proven practices. WordPress, I think for some of us and for some of you at this session, may be something that you consider, of course, that's a platform for publishing journal-like things. Others of you may think, no, WordPress is not something that I would write down on the list of platforms that are out there to publish journals on. So this talk is also thinking a lot about our principle around innovation and being able to provide some flexibility to the journals that we work with that are on WordPress, while also providing them their sort of necessities around publication. So if they need DOIs, we want to make sure we can get them DOIs, etc. WordPress, of course, is not our only publishing platform at the U of M libraries. We have a number of platforms, which all of us can tell you the history as to why we have the amount of platforms that we have and why that is. But in general, we use OJS and WordPress for things that are sort of journal-like. We use Manifold and Pressbooks for things that are more book-like. Of course, I would say that is not any kind of a strict definition or guideline as to why a publication may end up on one of these platforms instead of another. But we really are focused on making sure that the tools that we're using are evolving, that they're community supported, that they're open source. If there is a strong open source solution out there, that they're reliable and they're multimodal. So that's some of the thinking that we have behind this suite of tools that we have to offer. But today, of course, we are here to talk specifically about WordPress. Like I said, this is a presentation that we probably could have given in years past, but this really felt like the great year to do it. So I'm going to pass it on now to Shane to talk a little bit more about the reason we are all here, WordPress.
Hi, thanks. Thanks, Emma, for that introduction. Again, my name is Shane Nackerud, member of the Publishing Services team at the University of Minnesota. Yeah, our use of WordPress, really, it starts with the story of an older system called UThink. This is a screenshot of UThink from 2008. From 2004 to 2015, the University of Minnesota Libraries hosted blogs on a system called UThink for faculty, staff, and students at the university. And over the course of 11 years, over 18,000 blogs were created on the system, and over 43,000 users registered with the system. UThink ran on movable type, if anybody remembers that software. And it was one of our first forays into helping University of Minnesota people publish content. UThink was finally retired in 2015, and you might think to yourself, why? It sounds like it was pretty successful, but we were victims of our own success. It was really a beast to maintain. It takes a lot of staff effort to support thousands of sites and thousands of users. Movable type turned out to be a bad decision. It was the premier blogging tool in 2004. Well, in 2015, it was not. It was old. It was a Perl-based program. It no longer was open source, and security issues really became overwhelming on the system. At the end of UThink, there were over 22 million comments on the system, and many of those were spam. We had to block at times entire countries from getting into the system because of how much they were trying to spam and hack into UThink. So we had to shut it down. But over 11 years, UThink was used by courses, for assignments and course websites. It was used for newsletters. And it also was used at times as a content management system for some departments. It was heavily used at the university. And it was also used to publish some scholarly content. When we announced that UThink would be retired, some of the sites and departments contacted us to ask if we could continue to publish their sites and content. Next slide, please. Around the same time that we were retiring UThink, we were also launching the new Libraries Publishing Services Department. And we made the decision that we would retain some of the old UThink sites on a new WordPress installation. And we decided on WordPress because it was very popular. It was being requested by some of our users, like, why don't you put some of these sites on WordPress? Movable type migrations to WordPress were very common and somewhat easy to do. And it would allow us to retain some of those old UThink sites, but also create new WordPress sites. We saw that there would be an opportunity to use WordPress for some new sites, new journals, or new content as well. And a lot of those were going to be client-driven. I'll talk a little bit about that, like where clients would come and say, I want this particular site. I don't know how to do it. And we would think, maybe WordPress would work. So next slide, please. We published a number of blogs for our Humphrey School of Public Affairs on UThink, and here are two that we migrated to WordPress, Smart Politics and Election Academy. We are still publishing these sites. Note that Smart Politics has been in continuous publication since 2006. It was an early UThink site. Also note that we stopped calling sites like these blogs. Our department director at the time, Kate McCready, who I think a lot of you have probably met, she rightly determined that these sites were more than just informal blogs and came up with the term dynamic scholarly serials to denote a more scholarly tone for the content on the sites. And I just wanted to say to feel free to use that term yourself. We're I don't know, Kate's very proud of that term, so yeah, feel free to use it. Next slide, please. The law school also approached us to continue publishing some of their journal companion YouthThink sites on WordPress. Helping them continue to publish these journal companions, really, it opened the door for us to actually publish their journals through University of Minnesota Libraries Publishing. We would learn later that with law journals in general, WordPress equals prestige, since many of the most well-known law journals are published on WordPress, like the Harvard Law Review. And we would later learn that all of our law journals through the University of Minnesota Law School, they want to be on WordPress. And John will talk more about that in just a little bit. Next slide, please. Around the same time YouthThink was being retired, we were also approached by the River Life Project at the Institute of Advanced Studies. They wanted to publish a journal about the Mississippi River. And we partnered with them to create this journal called Open Rivers. They wanted something beyond a typical academic journal. They wanted big images and image carousels and embedded video and a lot of whiz-bangery functionality. For example, on the right there, you see they wanted a map that would show the reader what water locations have had articles written about them. And obviously, WordPress has a lot of different plugins to extend functionality that we were able to add to the site. And as Emmett has mentioned, really be innovative with this journal. It's one of our earliest journals and one that we're most proud of. If you'd like to learn more about Open Rivers, Emma and I gave a presentation of the CNI spring meeting specifically about Open Rivers, so check that out. It's been recorded. Next slide, please. Finally, WordPress has also given us the opportunity to publish content that goes beyond journals or monographs or serials. These are 2 syllabi we've published that can be used in a classroom to delve into specific topics. On the left is the purple syllabus, which is about the works and life of Prince. This was put together in coordination with the Prince Symposium that took place at the University of Minnesota in 2018. And then on the right, there's the immigration syllabus put together by our Immigration History and Research Center. Obviously provides some important context about a very important issue in the United States today. I'm going to turn it over to Laureen now to discuss how and why we select WordPress for publication.
Thanks, Shane. So yeah, as Shane mentioned, I'm going to take a couple minutes here to just talk about the process that we go through when we choose to use WordPress for publications. Some of the projects that come to us, they really need more design flexibility. As Shane mentioned with Open Rivers, there were a lot of things they wanted to do with that publication. Or just that they have a lot of requirements for the look and feel of their project. Or also, as Shane mentioned, sort of non-traditional or innovative projects kind of need more flexibility than some of our more templated solutions. A lot of our clients also are looking for HTML publishing, that they want to publish first as HTML. They want to be able to embed various forms of multimedia. And if they provide a PDF, it's sort of an add-on, a document attachment to their HTML articles. And as Shane kind of alluded to, WordPress comes with a WYSIWYG style editor that most of our authors and editors are familiar with using. Either they've used WordPress previously or they've used a similar type of platform. And it really cuts back on the amount of time that we have to spend training people on how to use the tool. It's very intuitive for them. Some of the considerations that we have to discuss with our partners are questions like developer time. We've Fortunately, we have some developer time, but we also understand it's not an unlimited resource. So if we choose one project, that might mean we can't choose another project. And as we build more and more of these websites, we're also sort of building more support and maintenance projects for ourselves. And John, who's going to talk after me, is the person who has to do a lot of that work. So we're always kind of sensitive about how much work are we creating for John. We also have to talk to our project partners about how they're going to manage the manuscript workflow. WordPress doesn't have a built-in manuscript workflow. For some projects, they're not doing traditional reviews or editorial processes, and so they're not worried about it. Other projects have, they're either using Google Docs or spreadsheets, or they have some other method for managing their manuscripts that is working for them. For the journal that I'll show you in just a minute, we actually use OJS 3. They receive a lot of manuscripts for that journal, so they use OJS 3 as the manuscript workflow tool, but then they have to take all of the articles out of OJS and actually publish them in WordPress. And the final consideration that we talk to our project partners about is that there is additional production and layout time especially for journals. Again, this may not apply to all of our projects, but if you have journals that are going to publish multiple issues per year, questions like manuscript management or article layout and production time are important issues for them to consider, whether or not they have the time and labor to do that work. So now we'll move to the next slide, and I'll show you an example of a journal that we publish on WordPress that uses sort of a lot, or that has a lot of these issues applying to it. So these are some screenshots from Panorama, and Panorama is the journal of the Association of Historians of American Art. And if you want to go look at their main webpage, it's journalpanorama.org. But on their main homepage, they have a table of contents of their current issue. And that table of contents, they have about 7 different content types. And they actually requested specific design cues for each different content type. So that's what I've kind of tried to highlight here with the screenshots. On the left-hand side is a content type where they publish a topic article, and then they have solicited response articles for the topic. So they want that category, the design, to reflect the fact that it's a collection of articles that you read together. On the right-hand side, for the book reviews that are an integral part of their publication, they want to highlight the title of the book cover artwork, and then the reviewer's name is kind of underneath that information. So the little specific layout pieces are actually types, and each required sort of a unique design work. The other thing I was
Laureen, I think you broke up for a second.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Can you guys hear me now?
Yep, it's just a little choppy.
Okay. All right. So if you want to move to the next slide, Emma.
Sorry, I clicked on a hyperlink. Is this right? There we go.
Okay, can you guys see me again?
Yep.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I got disconnected here and I have no idea why. So apologies. I'll quick cruise through the rest of this here. I wanted to just show a little bit of the production work that the editor for this journal, and we're still looking at Panorama, that the production editor has to do for this journal. Obviously, because it's an art history journal, there's a significant number of images that she has to work with throughout the layout. She usually starts by choosing kind of an interesting detail of one of the artworks and then cropping that to be the header image. And you can see that John has made an issue contents sidebar appear here so that, again, it's easier to browse those sort of grouped together article types that they have. And so here the editor has also laid out images in places and in ways that relate to how the article is talking about the images, and also that kind of allow the images to be viewable, that they're not too small or too large. And if you want to go to the next screen, Emma, this is further down in the same article. And I actually do have this article linked from the slides, which we'll share after the presentation is over. Further down in the same article, then, the production editor has also embedded an audio file. She's included a photograph of the performer actually from the audio file, and then the portion of the article that's describing the audio file and the image is wrapping around. So I just wanted to kind of show some of those screenshots to show that, like, this is how some of these journals are using the design and layout functionality of WordPress. So from here, I'll turn it over to John to actually describe to you all how he makes all of these amazing design elements work.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Barneson. I'm the Publishing Services web developer. I spend most of my time in WordPress, and today I'm going to talk about how, as a department, we go about customizing WordPress for publications. And within WordPress, you really customize things using two things: plugins and themes. The WordPress is open source and free to use and download, but one of the nice things about it is it does have a ecosystem of paid plugins. So there's a lot of motivated developers out there that are writing plugins for it. I'm going to be talking about the three main plugins that we use in our publications, starting with the easiest to use and then sort of working through the more difficult ones. And following that, I'm going to talk about how we theme our publications. So next slide, Emma. The backbone of our WordPress installation is a plugin called IssueM. In order to produce serial publications, you need to come up with a way to have volumes and issues. And IssueM is the tool that does that for us. It actually creates a taxonomy called issue, and then you can actually attach the articles of your journal to a particular issue. And you're not just limited to one issue, you can actually attach them to multiple issues if, for example, you're doing a special anniversary issue or something, so you can actually use articles in multiple issues. The other nice thing about IssueM is it has a draft mode. So if you publish twice a year and you spend 6 months working on an issue, you can actually keep that issue in draft mode for 6 months while you're assembling all the articles that are going into that issue. And then once you're ready, you can actually go live with that issue. The other nice thing is that it allows some sophisticated sorting, and it will track the how many articles you have in each issue. Next slide, please. This is sort of IssueM in action. This is another one of our law journals. The current issue by default always displays on the front page of the website. And the other nice thing about IssueM is it does have an archive function. So it gives us an easy way to provide a archive of all the previous issues that we've published for that particular journal. And again, it does allow for flexible naming and sorting. IssueM is free. The developers make their money by selling some supplementary tools that work with IssueM. I think they have a PDF export tool, and then they also have a subscription tool if you wanted to charge subscriptions for your journal. Next slide, please. And then moving into the slightly more difficult plugins, we use a page builder called Beaver Builder. Some of you may be familiar with like Wix and Squarespace. a Beaver Builder is sort of a slightly more sophisticated version of Squarespace or Wix. It gives us a whole bunch of different widgets, rows, columns, grids. Out of the box, it supports all the built-in base WordPress widgets like recent posts, categories, things that some of you might be familiar with if you've used WordPress before. The other nice thing about Beaver Builder is it's actively developed and has a large user base. There's hundreds of thousands of people are using it. So there's Slack channels and lots of available tech support. So if you need to build something in Beaver Builder, you're probably going to be able to find someone else who's already built the thing that you're looking to build. Next slide, Laureen. This is just a shot of Beaver Builder in action. This is another one of our law journals. Beaver Builder is heavily JavaScript based, and you actually work live on the page that you're building. So for example, with this site, you kind of have a main content area, and if you wanted to insert a 2-column layout with a right sidebar and a main content area, you literally just click on the element and drag and drop it into the content area and just start at that level and then just build up your entire wireframe of the publication. So you can have rows inside of rows with columns and columns until you get the wireframe laid out the way you want. In this journal here, Constitutional Commentary, there's a table of contents that is automatically generated, and then we have the different article and book review types that are in another grid down below, and those are all dynamically generated. And again, this uses IssueM as well. So 35.3 is of course the current issue, and then we have a issue archive that you can go in and view the previous issues. Next slide, Larry. And then this third plugin that I want to talk about is called Content Views Pro, and this is the most difficult to use out of the three. This is our high-end plugin. This is the same screenshot that Laureen used earlier. This is from Journal Panorama, and this is the how we build our complicated grid layouts, and it allows us to produce very complex representations of journal content. Next slide. And this is Content Views Pro in action. These are some of the different layouts and grids and stuff that we have available. I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but any of these plugins you can probably use without having to write a lot of code. That's the nice thing. And next slide. And how we theme our publications. We also use Beaver Builder to theme all of our publications. We create custom child themes for all of our journals, and we use Beaver Builder to do that. If you do go with child themes, you are going to actually have to write some custom code, unfortunately. So next slide. And this is the sort of a snapshot of some of the code. Beaver Builder does come with a plain vanilla child theme that you can use as a start. And that's how I begin all of my child themes. And the benefit of a child theme is you can update the parent theme, and your child theme is unaffected by the update. So that gives us maximum flexibility. So we can just go ahead and run updates on all of our themes and not have to worry about the child themes being affected by the updates. And next slide. And then a couple other issues that we deal with as a team. The main one now is accessibility. We're really trying to take accessibility seriously as a department, and we're going through and retroactively testing and updating all of our existing sites, which is a big project, and we're doing a pretty good job. We start designing accessible first now. I would say we're doing an okay job. We have a lot of sites that we still need to go back and and fixed, but most of our sites are passing with pretty high marks on most of the built-in accessibility checkers that you can run. And another big issue we're running into is domain names. Currently, our sites have to use our current WordPress server is called editions.lib, and then we have the journal name is a suffix that follows on the end of editions, and we're moving to a new host, and with the new host, each publication is going to be able to have its own unique domain. We found it to be a kind of a big headache to have publications manage their own domains, especially with the law school. People graduate or change jobs and they lose their passwords, and it becomes a big issue to maintain the domain names, and we really don't want them to lose their domain name. So that's a quick look under the hood on how we build and manage our WordPress sites. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so some of the issues that John just covered go directly into sort of what's next for us. So the first thing I will say is we at the U of M, as Shane opened with, are no strangers to migration. We have had to do migrations. We were at one time on BPress, we moved to OJS. Shane moved YouThink blogs onto WordPress. So we do not love to migrate, but it's also something that we are not in denial about, that it happens, and it happens for a lot of reasons, some of which are very much out of our control. So we right now are committed on our WordPress sort of path. We don't see that changing, especially anytime soon. One of the things that John just mentioned is, we are shifting now all of our existing WordPress sites to a hosted solution. We're using something called Bluehost. Shane took a lot of work in making sure that this contract with Bluehost got through the multiple levels of administration at the university. We now have that contract signed, so we will no longer be hosting our own WordPress server. That's a big deal for us. I'm sure any of you who have managed a WordPress server before knows how open to hacks and patches and everything that it is. So moving to Bluehost is really going to take some work and updates off of John and Shane's shoulders, who do the majority of that work. So we are in the process of finishing the last few publications and getting them onto our Bluehost server off of our university sanctioned WordPress server. Another thing that we are thinking about constantly in just general is thinking about the growth that we have as a publishing service, as a publisher, thinking about the number of publications that we have. I've only been at the University of Minnesota since 2016, and when I first came, we had like this wonderful handful of publications, and we still have wonderful publications, but it's now like 2 handfuls. So thinking about what does that mean for us? Laureen comes from the world of serial cataloging, so she's no stranger to, there's always work on a serial. So thinking about, what does growth look like for us? How can we manage that? And WordPress is really an area where we're especially thoughtful. John and Shane have skills that are often needed on other libraries' projects. Laureen and I work a lot with publications that are on WordPress, but we are not WordPress developers ourselves. So thinking about, what does it look like if Shane and John need to work on a different project within the libraries? How are we going to sort of manage the build of our WordPress journals? We are also continuing to refine our WordPress pairing with OJS. So as Laureen mentioned, we have a journal panorama that uses OJS for their submission and manuscript workflow processes, and that's not it's not the smoothest thing right now in the world. Obviously, if we were just running OJS front and back, it would be a lot smoother, but Panorama is on WordPress for very particular reasons, including, as Laureen showed, they're image heavy. I mean, they're art historians, so we really need some of that functionality of WordPress. So thinking about how how those two will interact in the future, what we might need to change about that. Another thing with Open Rivers is, and Shane mentioned this indirectly, Open Rivers, one of the reasons they're on WordPress is they wanted to be accessible to a type of reader that is not a Dr. So-and-so in their brick building on University of whatever. They wanted community voices to be represented in their journal, and that's who they wanted to read the journal. It wasn't a pursuit of the ivory tower. It was really community-based scholarship. So that being said, Open Rivers has been hesitant, and I think rightfully so, to implement a fairly formal submission or manuscript management tool, because they're working with authors who likely will never publish another piece of something in the same way that they have with Open Rivers. These are not folks who are building a promotion and tenure dossier, right? They are experts in their community and personal life, which is why they're writing for Open Rivers. So we're also thinking about, are there back end submission or manuscript management tools that maybe would be helpful without putting too much work on the shoulders of authors or editors. So that's a big area of development. Someday when one of us has some hidden free time, I guess we'll try to set out and solve that problem. The other big thing that we are doing and have been working on, speaking of free time, is that we are actually launching our University of Minnesota Libraries publishing catalog. So this will, I know it's hard to say the word catalog in a library context, but we need somewhere to display all of our publications. And that's been a challenge because we have publications all over the place, right? We have OJS publications, we have Pressbooks, we have WordPress, we have manifold titles. So we need somewhere that centrally stores all of these. We have been using our library website, which runs on Drupal, to do that, but we needed some additional functionality. One of their sort of pie in the sky ideas was, wouldn't it be great if we could actually pull reports from our front-facing catalog to tell us some additional information? For example, we have 1 million metadata fields. One of those metadata fields may be University of Minnesota College in which the publication is associated with. So wouldn't it be great if we had that captured somewhere and we could just download that as a CSV file and be able to have that data at our fingertips? So that is what we are putting the finishing touches on right now. We've been working on it the last couple of months, and that catalog will display all of our titles and have the ability to do some of those reporting functions. So that is what is next for us. We are happy now to take any questions you have, if they are slide specific,